Trust is defined as the reliance on the integrity, strength, ability, and surety of a person or thing. In many of our daily interactions, we hope that people we hold in esteem or those we rely on can be trusted. We live in a world where there are sheep and there are wolves. We learned early in the Brothers Grimm story of Little Red Riding Hood, there is someone who will prey on the trusting and the vulnerable. Dr. Allama Iqbal once said, "Be careful whom you trust. Salt and sugar look the same." Perhaps we were overly optimistic when we said there was no boogeyman. Yes, my friends, the boogeyman is real. But the boogeyman doesn't look the way we would expect a boogeyman to look. Between 1983 and 1987, an average of 1 case per week of past or present sexual abuse by a priest was reported nationwide. But this story isn't just about priests. Judas Iscariot was one of the original disciples who had followed Jesus for 3 years. For just 30 pieces of silver, he led soldiers to the Garden of Gethsemane, where he would call Jesus Rabbi as a way to identify who Jesus was so that the soldiers could arrest him and deliver Jesus to the Sanhedrin. Let's just put this in perspective. In today's dollars, the silver in those 30 coins would be the equivalent of $197. Beulah George Tan operated the Tennessee Children's Home, where she ran a black market child trafficking operation, calling the business an adoption agency. She is believed to have stolen approximately 5,000 children who were homeless, poor, and in hospitals, profiting millions of dollars. At least 19 of those children were killed because of abuse and neglect. Many of those children were sold to rich clients. One such A-list client was actress Joan Crawford, who purchased her twin daughters from this agency. In 1966, William O'Neal chose to become an FBI informant to infiltrate the Chicago-based Black Panthers. It was discovered that O'Neal drew a floor plan for the Black Panther leader Fred Hampton's apartment and gave it to the FBI. And in the early morning hours of that morning, the FBI raided Hampton's apartment, killing Black Panther leaders Mark Clark and Fred Hampton. It was noted that O'Neal was paid $300 a week, plus bonus. Bernie Madoff, master of the Ponzi scheme, is credited with stealing the wealth of investors to the tune of $64 billion. One of his investors lost $500 million. While Madoff received a 150-year prison sentence, the federal government was only able to recover $14 billion. It was reported that he had defrauded 137,000 people in 136 countries over a period of 4 decades. As a society, there are certain positions that are classified as positions of trust. This requirement is customarily assigned to roles where the incumbents interact with children and at-risk adults. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Michelle, and I want to welcome you to another segment of Tabernacle Talks. And our guest on today's segment is Elder Trenae Pruitt. Welcome, Trenae, to Tabernacle Talks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Michelle.
Well, the first thing I think before we just jump into, our topic, because today we are talking about, in case the audience isn't aware, we're talking about people that have been hurt and hurt by the church. And I think damaged actually is the term that you use. So that takes it up to me a higher grade than just being hurt. People that have actually been damaged by their relationship with the church. But before we get into that, can you talk to us about the ministry? Obviously, I called you Elder Pruitt. What led you into the ministry, and just tell us a little bit about yourself so the audience can know the incredible human being that I know you to be.
Well, okay, I'm going to start here. Ministry has always been in my blood. It's just part of who I am. And as you know, Dr. Michelle, you've known me all my life.
All your life. All your life, yes.
Literally all my life.
All your life.
And Tabernacle is where I started. Tabernacle is where I started. I always felt, even as a little girl, that God was going to do something with me. I just didn't know what. Found myself going, different places as I developed over the years. And I think the biggest point of where I knew for a fact that I was going to be in evangelism in some kind of shape, form, or fashion. I always knew that. And when I was in college, I can remember when I was in college, one of my college roommates, who became one of my bestest friends, and it was crazy because she didn't believe in God. So you can imagine, here I am, a devout Christian, raised in a Christian home, going to college, and my roommate is the one who's saying, I don't believe in God, I have nothing to do with them. And I'm like, okay, this is really a test. I was like, I can't stay in this room. That's how I felt. I was like, I can't stay in this room. I cannot stay in this room. I'm not doing this. But Lord, I know you got to get me out of here. And then it was like, nope. Because I talked to my mom, I talked to my sisters, and I even talked to Pastor Thompson at the time. And it was like, got some guidance on what to do. And I said, okay, but I still don't like this, And then I had a friend who, another friend of mine, who's one of my best friends in college, who also was, raised the same way that I was. And God has sent us where we were able to minister to her together. And like I said, it was a long haul for us to become best friends, trust me. And as time had progressed and years had passed, graduated from school, everything like that, I get a call one day. And I mean, I had been praying for her for years and everything. Got a call one day and she says, I got something to tell you. I said, hold the line, and I began to shout because I knew what it was. And then she told me that she had received Christ as her personal savior. I was like, thank you, Lord. Oh, wow. That was over a course of several years.
So she saw by your example, and maybe the best thing you could have done was to let her see your example. Exactly. And had you left and not been her roommate, she may not have seen the differences and how your life was different and how you had joy when maybe she didn't see that or feel that. Wow.
But you know what, though? This is what made me say, God, I'm yielding to my call. My friend died 26 years ago. I couldn't do nothing but shout because I said, thank God that she's safe.
Wow. What a testimony.
So here I am, licensed ordained minister on the battlefield for my Lord, like the old song says.
Well, Trenae, you have been on the battlefield, and there is this amazing book that you've written. You are the author of the book called Damaged Goods, Hurt by the Church. Mm-hmm. And I'm intrigued that a licensed minister would tackle such a topic like this. What motivated you to write this book?
Well, this is what happens. Because my life, like I said, is basically always about pleasing God. and I want to see people be saved. I really want to see them really want to see them saved. And it was just hurting on my heart that you have people within the church who was hurting other people, and they did not seem to care. And as I look around and you see people jockeying for position, so to speak, you see some people don't like to hear it said this way, but church politics. People don't like to see it or hear it, but you have a lot of that going on. And when that is happening, you got a lot of people that we have left behind that want to be a part, that want to be in the fellowship, that want to, do something great and marvelous for the Lord as well. It might not be anything like preaching or singing or dancing, or even being an usher, but something marvelous like, hey, I got a poem that I want to share with you about how much I love the Lord. And and over here, I just want to take the children out and teach them another little way to play a nice game, something. But you have so many people that I've seen, and I'm saying this is from me being affiliated with different churches, different types of groups that were of religious founding, and so many people hurting. And then I also look at it from the workplace. I like to say that a lot of things that I do in my ministry is what we call marketplace ministry. Marketplace ministry is the ministry where you are out in the field. You're out in the marketplace and you talk to everybody, you welcome everybody, and you just be who you are, and you let the light of God that's in you shine. And being in those different areas, seeing the people in the marketplace, and they just walk up to me sometimes. Hey, you know what? I mean, I could be on a park bench, literally, I kid you not. And someone would come and sit next to me. How you doing? Oh, I'm fine. And then they got to tell me all their life story and everything that's going on. And I say, okay. And then God opens the door to minister to them, So when I'm looking at it, I look at it from the workplace, from home, from the social organizations, to everywhere that you can touch a light. That's why it was important.
Now, how did your colleagues receive your book? Because you're clergy. So
believe it or not, most of the clergy that I know, most of them, not all of them, most of them were like, hey, okay, that's cool. Because a person who was my former pastor wrote the foreword to my book. Okay. And he was like, this is just awesome. So the thing is, you'll say, what can we do to help people? What can we do to help them? And what do? We do what Jesus did. We meet them at their point of need.
Now, when a person hears damaged by the church, I'm sure their first thing they probably thought about is, they're going to talk about the scandal in the Catholic Church. What say you to that?
That's not what my book was about. It's not. I'm literally talking about damaged goods, and the damaged goods are the people of God. That's what the damaged goods are. With that being said, I'm saying it in terms of the universal church, not the Catholic Church, not the Baptist Church, not the Apostolic Church, not the Unitarian Church, but the universal church.
The church.
The church, because what I address is I do put in there as I'm starting out to let people understand what the church is. The church is an organism, which is organized by God. And we are the church, which is the ecclesia, which is the called out. The ones who was like Moses. Moses was drawn out, that's what he means. So we are the ecclesia, those of us who have received Christ, those of us who are believers. And so with us being the church, unfortunately, the church hurts the church. And once we begin to hurt the church, whose side are you leaning on? That's where we go. Whose side are you leaning on? And then sometimes we hurt and we don't know we hurt.
Well, you have a book that you've written, and do you mind sharing whatever you feel comfortable sharing with the audience, whether it be an excerpt, a story, so that the audience can get a sense and then go out and actually get a copy, but whatever you want to share.
All right. This one was one of the interviews I did, and I did rename the people because if there's somebody out there that knows them, I do not want anybody judging anyone or calling their church hurt petty, because what hurts one person might not hurt another, and vice versa.
Okay.
So this was a young lady named Crystal, and this is how it goes. It says Crystal is a person who loves God, married. She has 2 sons. Crystal went to her pastor for counseling on an issue she had concerning her husband's refusal to attend church. Crystal said that during the counseling session, the pastor gave her advice and asked if she could possibly persuade her husband to come into the office for counseling sessions. Her husband did not believe counseling sessions were necessary because he had no interest in attending church. After several counseling sessions, the pastor made a pass at Crystal and touched her inappropriately. Crystal was devastated that her pastor would violate her. This was a person she trusted to help her, not hurt her. Crystal says she was raped in her early 20s, and the actions of her pastor resonated memories that she tried to forget. She could not understand why her pastor would try to take advantage of her. Crystal said that she did not tell her husband what happened. Since the incident, she has not attended church on a regular basis. And Crystal still believes there are some good pastors out there who have had a true heart for the people. What Crystal advises is this. She says, keep on loving God, believing God, and getting to know God. Don't let anybody or anything stop you from having a relationship with God. Know that everyone has some kind of issue, including the pastors.
Wow. Wow. You have several stories in your book about people who have been hurt, interacting with people they trust. And in this case, these are people in the church. Why did you think this story was important to write?
As far as
just giving, I think, informing the public that there are people of trust, not just in churches, but in our school systems. We see it with our elected officials. We see it with our police department, people that are in positions that are supposed to help us, our physicians. When we look at the issue that happened with all the gymnasts in Michigan, there are just so many countless stories of people that have been put in positions of trust and they abuse that. And I do think it's important to tell those stories. Why did you specifically think the stories about the church were important? First of all, not the Catholic Church, but other denominations experience the same thing. Why did you think that was important to write?
Once again, for me, it's all about saving souls. And it's about letting people know that although these things happen, life experiences is what makes us and what molds us. Church hurt is going to come from everywhere, no matter what. And again, it's about the universal church. There's no specific denomination. There's no other way to say this except for it's important for people to know that there's somebody out there that can relate to them. You're not the only one that this happened to. Just like what I just read with Crystal. Crystal's married. How many married folks do we have out here that want their husbands or want their wives to go to church, and they refuse to go to church, and they have their reasons for refusing to go? Sometimes it's because of the way that their spouse acts in front of them. Sometimes it's because of interactions they've had with other, what they call church folk. Okay. She has 2 sons. In the book, I even talk about who is your first force of social life? Your family, your immediate family. There goes the trust issue again. You know.
Wow. And it really probably just reinforced for her, if her spouse had been saying there's no reason for me to go there, the people aren't real, and then she has an experience like that, she could have gone the other way. So I think I had to applaud Crystal that she didn't go the other way, to say, maybe it's right and I could sit at home, but her love for God was greater than that incident. And
and the one thing that I loved about, like, when I interviewed a whole lot of people, but I'll say, like, what I loved about Crystal was when she said, don't let anybody or anything stop you from having a relationship with God. It's about your relationship. Because, like you said, she could have walked away from God. You know, how many people get upset and mad at God, raise their hands and, throw their fists up at God and say things that I wouldn't dare to say to God, but how many people do that? And how many people walk away and say there is no God because of the hurt and the damage that's happened to them in the church or by the church? I'm not always talking about just in the 4 walls. I'm talking about we as, like I said, the called out ones doing some serious damage. We're supposed to be doing some helping,
Now, when I was doing research for this segment, one of the things that I recognized in that research is that a lot of the small to mid-sized churches, even though we hear about all these stories about there being predators in positions of trust and people being abused, they still don't have workplace controls in place that even do the most basic background checks on individuals working with children or working with other vulnerable citizens. Why do you think the small and mid-sized churches have not recognized or accepted that there are vulnerable populations that we're supposed to protect?
I'm going to go to it from this angle. When you have a small church, mid-sized church, the visionary, they're not thinking that. Their main focus, and be it that they're authentic, okay, I'm going to go there. Be it that they're authentic. Their main focus is, we want some saved folks in here. We want to save. In other words, we want to save the world. We know that the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. So if we can get a harvest and reap a harvest of souls, that's what's going to count to us. If we reap this harvest of souls, they're not necessarily always looking to say, well, we need to do background check because, although sister or brother so-and-so has their own children and it looks like their children are doing great and they're good for the children's ministry, they don't know. Brother and sister so-and-so actually might be abusing their children. But they don't know. All they know is they see this family that comes and they don't necessarily pick up on it because the visionary is sometimes so involved in saying, I gotta get this church moving. I gotta get this church running. It's like I said earlier, the church is an organism organized by God. So there has to be some organization. And just like any other organizational structure, okay, you have to abide by the laws, okay? Just because you are a religious institution does not mean that you don't abide by the laws of the land. The word of God tells us we still have to do that. We still have to abide by the laws of the land.
Which is an excellent segue to, in your anthology, you spoke with a variety of people. You actually interviewed them. How many of the perpetrators actually were brought into some formal legal system, or was it held in confidence within the church, because there's this separation of church and state that people literally believe there shouldn't be a legal consequence when there is illegal behavior that happens inside of the church.
Every single person that I talked to that had an encounter such as that would have been there, like Crystal, they were afraid. Some people were afraid. And then there were some people there, they just said, you know what? Because I know God will take care of it, I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just stay away from that, from that person, from that church, and they go away. Now, watch this. Now, I did not interview, again, none of the people who I interviewed had that happen. Now, in doing research where I have read different stories, different things that has come out, there has been people who have taken pastors, taken deacons, taken fellow parishioners to court, okay? And usually, and I have to be careful when I say this, usually from what I've seen, those individuals who did take people to court, their social status was different than those who did not take people to court. If you understand what I'm saying.
Go into that deeper, because what I hear you say is that post the complaint, people that maybe had more resources felt more comfortable pursuing action, or either there was a consequence and they lost. I'm not sure. Did they lose social standing and status after going into a courtroom?
See, that I cannot identify to say that they did or did not. Because I didn't go that deep into seeing whether they were, excommunicated or whether they stayed. I'm trying to think while we're talking if there was anything that I can think of where there was any cases like that. And right now, off the top of my head, I cannot.
Because it was interesting when I was doing research for this segment, one of the authors talked about there were just certain patterns of behavior that they saw in some of the Catholic scandals. And initially it was, a person or family would bring a complaint. The archdiocese or something would look into the complaint. They'd kind of sit down with the family and say, well, you really don't want this to be a bigger deal, because they didn't want their children exposed. So they would give the priest retraining or whatever, psychological counseling, and then they would return him to that church or another church.
Correct.
Once they started seeing that was just the pattern of how they were doing that and the abuse didn't stop, they ramped it up a little more and said, okay, we're going to make sure that the punishment, at least the family feels that their punishment is greater. But then they got into this whole era of making people sign non-disclosure agreements.
Right.
So that there was a legal consequence or a financial consequence to them, and paying them, so that, again, things didn't go into the court system. And so I think because people hear and see that I'm going to be shamed or I'm going to be humiliated, and people really talked about their church members got angry with them. Fellow parishioners were angry with them. Like, why would you bring this shame upon our congregation instead of protecting the children? It was just very odd to me that people reacted the way that they did.
Well, this is one of the things that we don't always look at. When it's not happening to you, then I'm going to be mad because I know that couldn't have happened to you because it didn't happen to me. And then when it's your turn, you see where I'm going? Then when it's your turn, it's a whole different ballgame.
Oh, different ballgame.
Mm-hmm.
I always give my guests the last word. What do you think is important for anybody in the audience, if they're sitting there and they're watching this now and they're thinking, wow, something like this really inappropriate did happen to me? And I'm suffering in silence with this because this is still happening to me. What would you tell them?
Okay, let me say this. Number one, if there's anybody who has been a recipient of such behavior, I will say that you need to really talk to somebody. Because, like, as you know, you cannot always go through it alone. A lot of times people, and I'm just going to go here, in the African American community especially, or the brown community, sometimes we don't want to go see a therapist. We don't want to go to see, because we say, well, that's why we have the church. That's why we go to the pastor. That's why we go to the, to the mothers. That's why we, sometimes you need a licensed professional. And you can get a Christian licensed professional to help you. And that's what I would definitely recommend if anybody is going through something like that. Because why would you sit amongst the people hurting? Or why would you remove yourself and still hurt even more? I just wonder sometimes to myself, how many people have taken their lives, their own lives, just based on how they were treated by somebody else. I mean, we see it all the time with the children, with the bullying, and that's just cyberbullying. That's not even bullying in person. So we have to understand the mental anguish part of it. And that if you feel that you have been wronged in any way by any church leader, please seek help. Seek professional help. That's why they're paid, to keep it confidential. Right, Dr. Michelle?
That's right. You absolutely know.
Right.
Trenae, Elder Pruitt, it is amazing to just see you after all these years. And I mean, we have known each other all our lives. That you have written an amazing book. And I will tell everybody in the audience, I'm going to make sure we show it here so everybody can see it. Damaged Goods, Hurt by the Church by Elder Trenae Pruitt. Go out and get this book, read it. It will be very eye-opening. And I think it's just a testimony that you are in the right space out there, spreading just God's message of hope and redemption and healing. And I think that's just an important message for people to know, that you can heal, and there's no shame in needing help to do that.
I got one more thing to say about the book really quickly.
Okay.
There, at the end of each chapter, there's self-evaluations.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that word up. Yes.
Did you hurt, or did you do the hurting?
You're right. Because I think some of our abusers will pick up this book and realize maybe they're the hurt. Thank you, Elder Pruitt.
Thank you. It has been wonderful spending time with you, even though I couldn't.
I know. Virtual hug. It's a COVID hug.